Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Small Business CFO with Lola and Terrell from the Business Talk Library. Now, today we're going to talk about a topic that is very important because right now we are in a season called tax season. Now, I know I get this question a lot because people think just because I have the designation of CPA that automatically means the only thing I do is taxes. And that's not true. I do understand it, and there's a lot that goes into it. And you know, the reason why I think people ask that question a lot is because they don't really understand what tax season means. They don't really understand how tax impacts their business. And if they don't understand that stuff, what I would guess is a huge issue that they're having is they're probably not properly preparing for tax season. Because there are a lot of things that you can do in the meantime leading up to it that will really make a huge difference. So I really wanted to jump into this conversation with Lola on how to properly prepare for tax season. So when you're thinking about going into tax season, Lola, what is it that you think about, hey, these are things that people need to do to prepare for tax season?
I would say you should have already been prepared for tax season. That would be my first take. And I think part of that is really just having your financials right. I mean, if you think about it, even from not just as a business owner, but even in just your personal finances, if you have your taxes, your stuff, your documents, your W-2, everything that you needed, you have everything, records of everything, it makes it a whole lot easier when tax season comes. So I would say the first thing, let's just assume you don't have everything ready. I would recommend you start as soon as possible. Don't wait till April 5th to start. Is now start kind of putting together your spend for the year. And let's just focus specifically on business owners, right? Like start getting your financials together for 2020, your revenue, your expenses, different things like that to really position. So I think on the bare minimum, I would say the bookkeeping part, you really need to start cleaning up and be able to report, hey, how much money did I make in my business? What do my expenses look like? And then ideally, you should have a good enough view to be able to hand this over to your accountant to then start to prepare your tax return for the year.
No, I think that is good. I mean, it definitely dives right into the details. I know when I'm talking to people, one of the things that I like to do is take a step back and just like, hey, let's take this step by step. And the first thing I always tell them is, when it comes down to taxes, the first thing we need to do is we need to work on, how you think about this. Is it knowing that, hey, filing your taxes is a process. Part of the process is gathering your information, making sure that is squared away. Another part is if you have like regular filings, let's say, for example, the payroll taxes and stuff like that. Also getting your 1099s out if that impacts your business. Getting the W-2s out. Like there are different stages of the process where you have to collect your information. You have to get information out to other parties. And some of those do have deadlines that the IRS places. And if you don't meet those deadlines, you're going to get penalties. And then the other part is then really actually getting the taxes filed. And then after the taxes are filed, whether you owe or the return process, that's another step. So there's like 4 different, parts of this process. And I think sometimes, when people are individuals, they're so used to the process being so simple that, hey, I brought my stuff in here, I sat down with this person for 2 hours and it was done. When you're a business, it's probably not going to be the same.
Not at all.
I mean, when you're a business, the process is going to be a little bit longer than, hey, you brought your stuff in, you sat down for 2 hours and it was done. So I think business owners really have to get in the mindset that, hey, you know what, this isn't going to be like a couple-hour process. There's a couple steps that I need to think about now that I'm a business owner that I didn't have to think about when it came down to me filing as an individual. I mean, what's been your experience with that?
I think part of it also is just a mindset shift, because I think on one end, I think it really comes down to mindset, is the preparation. I think a lot of times business owners dread it And even just on a personal side, like a lot of people, if they don't have a basic understanding of kind of like the tax process and how it works, or just tax returns period, it's something that a lot of people dread, right? You start to get to January and people are like, oh my gosh, I gotta go sit with my accountant for 3 hours. Like I gotta go do these taxes. And now I just need, basically they tell me, hey, sign here. This is how much you're gonna get. They ask me these questions and I'm done, right? And then I don't have to worry about this for another year. I think a lot of times that's how business owners approach it, which is dangerous because like you mentioned, you should be doing quarterly filings. There are different things depending on the type of business that you have that you should be taking into account. And I think if you approach it kind of like as something that you're dreading, it's not going to be fun. And so I think for me is just one of the things that I've observed and seen is the sooner you address it, the quicker and the better for you. And I think even getting outside of that mindset of just having it be one whole big activity is really going to help you. But one of the things that I've seen a lot of times is it's a dreaded activity. They don't do it until the end of the year, which just puts you in a position. It's not a fun place to be, because the other side of tax returns that I don't think a lot of people talk about, especially if you just started a business, is that there's certain benefits that come with, whether it's grants or any tax benefits that you might have in terms of tax strategies, depending on your expenses or different spend that you have, that you may be able to take advantage of before the end of the year. And if you're not regularly filing the quarterly fees or quarterly filings that you need, or if you're not regularly reviewing it and having the discussion with your accountant, then you won't know, like, hey, what things do I need to do differently during the year to really put myself in a good position to basically benefit as much as I can from whatever tax bracket or tax situation my company finds itself in. So what are some of the things that you would say, just going back to the comment that you made about making sure that they're filing their taxes on a quarterly basis, or they're taking care of that on a quarterly basis versus waiting till the end of the year? What are some taxes or some filings that you would recommend that business owners take into consideration and actually execute on throughout the year?
I think something to consider is, if you have employees, the payroll taxes, like the withholding taxes. Now, if you're using a payment processor, or I could say a payroll processor, they should be filing that information for you. Like they should be withholding that money and handing it over to the government. Now, you want to make sure, like I said, that's handled properly, because what I have seen a situation where I was talking with a friend of mine in New York, and he had a business that came to him because they just got a letter from the IRS saying that they owe $90,000. And like what was going on, and what was happening is they had a bookkeeper that was processing their payroll, but the bookkeeper wasn't actually transmitting the payment to the IRS. So all of these fees that they were supposed to be handing over to the IRS weren't being done. So now they got a $90,000 bill. They need to try to figure it out. So you want to make sure on a quarterly basis, you should be, paying the federal government or the state government whatever you were withholding from your employee's paycheck. Now, another area is on your quarterly income taxes. Based on what your projected income was for the year, you should be making estimated payments if you're not already having taxes withheld from a paycheck or something like that. So if you own a business and you're like, well, I don't know how much money I'm going to make, well, you're responsible for making an estimate of, hey, I think I'm going to make this much money this year. This is how much I think I'm going to owe, and to make regular payments throughout the year. Because if you don't, then you get to the end of the year, you're going to actually have penalties if you haven't made estimated quarterly taxes. And then I think also on the sales tax, I mean, depending on how much and depending on how your state or your county works. Now, sales tax is a state level one, but you may have some quarterly filings there, or you may have monthly filings there, depending on how much your sales tax bill may be. Each state or county handles it differently. So you want to keep those things in mind, like kind of on a, more quarterly kind of monthly basis.
Got it. Now, just to go back to sales taxes, I think this is an area that has confuses some business owners, and this is an area where it took me some time to pick up. How would you define sales tax?
So sales tax, I mean, like I said, this one it can get a little complicated. So when people don't understand, I tell them, hey, don't feel bad about it. It can be complicated because, I mean, your sales taxes are not controlled at the federal level. I mean, to be honest with you, your sales taxes are controlled at, it's kind of a state level thing. But then
Hmm.
within each state, each county may have their own unique rules. So, if you're doing business and let's say you do your business, let's say if you're a restaurant and you deliver, you run deliveries. Because you're doing deliveries, if you cross over county lines, it may put you in a completely different sales tax scenario. So
Hmm.
sales tax really is, your state and local government's way of saying, hey, for doing business in this, in our jurisdiction, you need to add, let's say, 7% or a half a percent or whatever that percentage is. You need to add that to the price of your product. And that's what you need to pay to us for us allowing you to do business in this jurisdiction. And oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask a question because that's kind of how that's how I understood it when when I was struggling with it a little bit is basically money that you're paying the state or the county to do business in their city per transaction or something, or to do business in their state. Would you say that, because I think a lot of times when people look at like, for example, if I'm going back to the restaurant example, is the mindset of like this money that I'm collecting is not for me. It needs to go back to the county or the state or whatever. So just like in terms of how would you recommend business owners managing that? Do they put the money aside on a monthly basis, weekly basis, or daily basis? How should they handle that?
But I would tell me it really depends on like how disciplined you are. Now, if you're like most business owners, that's going to get handled by your payment processor. And then the payment processor is going to drop that money into your bank account. And most
Mhm.
business owners are like, oh, I got cash in the bank. It's like, no, not all that cash belongs to you.
Right.
And if you get behind and you don't pay those sales taxes, the county will let you know, hey, not all that money belonged to you. Some of it belonged
Mhm.
to us. So I would tell business owners, if you can set up an arrangement where you can actually submit, let's say, payments throughout the month. Because if you know that, hey, if the money's in my account, I'm going to accidentally spend it, either move that money into a different account. So when you file your sales tax return at the end of each month or in each quarter, the money is already set aside to pay it, or
Mhm.
just pay the sales tax in advance, like hand the money over to, the local Department of Revenue before the end of the month so you don't end up spending money that doesn't belong to you.
No, that's really good. I think that's a good tip because that is an area that I've seen a lot of people have struggled with. Are there any other tips that you would have for business owners just when it comes to tax filings or just different things they should consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is, there's some that they aren't directly related to I guess, to your taxes, but they
Hmm.
are, things that get done in tax season. For example, like, if you have employees, getting out the W-2s, like W-2s have to be sent out by a certain deadline. I mean, because if you think about it, the people you employ in your business, they're waiting on that W-2 so that they can file their tax return. So
Yep.
you don't want to, keep them waiting. You want to get that done as soon as you can. So you pretty much, when you file a W-2, you're letting the IRS know, hey, I paid XYZ person X amount of dollars throughout the year, and here's the breakdown. And then you send the employee a copy of that W-2. Again, if you're using a payment processor is going to take care of that for you. Uh,
Hmm.
and then the other thing are 1099. So if you are, hiring contractors, or, you're paying people to provide a service in your business, or if you're paying the rent for your lease or whatever that is, if you are making payments like that, more than likely there should be a 1099 that's created. And pretty much what that does is that's your way of telling the IRS, hey, I paid, XYZ landlord X dollars, for the entire year for me to lease my facility. Here's their tax ID number, and, here's their address. Here's how much I paid them. And the IRS requires you as a business owner to file that, because the IRS uses that to then, reference it against their tax return. Because if you're saying that you paid, the landlord, $8,000 this year, they're
Hmm.
expecting to see at least $8,000, including in your landlord's tax return.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually didn't know that. I just learned something new. I didn't know you have to file a 1099 for like a lease. Is it only if it's like a business? Like if you're renting a business space?
Yeah,
Or
it's if it's your personal living arrangement,
Mhm.
you don't have to file a 1099 for that.
Okay,
It's
okay.
more of if you're using a space for business purposes, so you have to file a 1099. Now there are some exceptions, like if the person you're leasing it from is a corporation, then
Okay.
you don't have to file it. Now also if you're paying them through, let's say if you have like a PayPal business account or
Hmm.
like a Cash App business account, like some type of merchant processor. If you're
Hmm.
paying them through that, then the merchant processor like PayPal is actually going to create the 1099 on your behalf, so you
Oh,
won't
okay.
have to do it.
Got it.
But for the most part, if you're writing them a check or if you're paying them cash or if you're using like PayPal or Cash App and you're not using the business version, then more than likely Cash App or PayPal, they won't know to create a 1099 because you're not using the business version. Now, one of the things also to remember is that if you don't file those 1099s, the IRS could charge you a penalty for not
Mm.
getting those 1099s filed properly. Now, one of the big things that stops a lot of people from filing a 1099 is that they don't have the vendor's EIN or social security number. And
Hmm.
so you definitely want to make sure that when you start a business relationship with someone, like when you sign the lease, send your landlord a form W-9. And what it does is it tells them, hey, here, just fill this out. They have like 3 boxes to fill out. And when they fill those boxes out, that will give you all the information you need to file a 1099. Because if you don't have that W-9 from them, the IRS says technically you're supposed to be withholding some of the payment from them until you
Hmm.
get a W-9 back. Because
Yeah.
the IRS expects you to be able to properly file the 1099. So you want to make sure that you have everything you need from them so you don't end up getting a penalty.
Yep. The other thing I was going to say also is going back to like the softwares like QuickBooks and other things. I know QuickBooks gives you the option to actually set up like a contractor in the system. So then you can actually go in, add them, you can email them a request to actually fill in that information. And it's a secure portal. So you don't have to worry about keeping their secure information and exchanging it via email because they can go into QuickBooks, they can fill all that in, put in their social security information or EIN, and then you have them registered in the system. So I think doing that, like you said, Terrell, at the beginning when you develop the relationship will make it a lot easier because then you can connect all the payments that you're making to those individuals or to the vendors, whatever payments you're making to them, you can connect it to their name. That way, whenever it's time to actually issue the 1099, all you have to do is go in there, find them, and start the process. So I think that's a great tip, and that makes a lot of sense. I think another thing that I have a question on, just to kind of wrap it up, is what would you recommend in terms of like trying to find the right accountant to work with when you think about like tax return and tax season? Because I think a lot of times people think, well, if someone just has a CPA behind their name, or if someone is just an accountant, then they're good at and they can file my taxes for me. But are there just certain things you would recommend that business owners like that are listening should look out for? Like, hey, if I'm looking for a tax, someone to actually do my business tax return, what are some of the things I need to watch out for?
I would say the first thing, I mean, if you're a business owner, you have to understand your situation is completely different from when you were just an individual. Like if you were just
Mhm.
an employee, you waited to tax season, oh, I'm gonna go down the H&R Block, or hey, I'm gonna just, I heard this person does taxes or whatever. I'm gonna just go to them. Like that may have been fine when you were just an employee and you just had a
Mhm.
W-9. But now that you're a business, you really want somebody who understands your business, someone
Yep.
who understands what you're trying to do, because your investment strategy may come into play to where, let's say, if you want to pull the profits out and you want to reinvest it into some tax-free vehicle. Like
Hmm.
if you're waiting until April to go talk to somebody, you're not going to get that kind of advice. What's going to happen?
Right.
You wait too late, you're going to get somebody who just takes whatever you give them and then they're going to put it in the forms, and then they're going to hand you back a result. and you might be happy, you might not be happy with it. So I would always say, I mean, you first thing is you want to work with somebody who understands your type of business. So you want to start that relationship or start those conversations early and ask them like, hey, have you filed, have you filed taxes for this type of business before? The
Mhm.
other thing you want to do is you want to work with somebody, even if they filed taxes, similar to your business before, is pay attention to the questions that they ask you. Like when you show up and you give them a call, are they asking you questions to really understand your tax situation? Or are they just, hey, here, they ran through their 5 questions, you answer their 5 questions, and then they're just trying to crank out as many tax returns as possible? Because when I've seen that happen before, a lot of situations have come up where the IRS has come back and said, hey, everyone who got their taxes done by XYZ person, you need to refile. And those people weren't able to get their money back and
Yep.
it ran into penalty. So you want to make sure, hey, does this person actually care about filing my tax return properly? Because what you will realize is that some people that they've used TurboTax or they've used some type of tax software and they feel like they're a guru. And it's just like, no, that's not the case.
No, you're not. You still need, and I think actually to go along with that, I think the course that we have on selecting the right type of finance support is a great course to kind of give you guidance, not just when it comes to tax season, but I think if you also think about just having the right type of finance support, because like Terrell said, it saves a lot of time, a lot of pain, and you want to make sure, especially when it comes to taxes, that you're complying with the law and that you have someone who is really looking out for your business, has an understanding of what exactly is going on with your business, and has experience actually working in that space. Because what you don't want to do is have someone who just has a peanut butter spread approach. Because if you run into those situations, if something happens, and you run into a situation where something wasn't done correctly, you are fully responsible and liable for that. So it's extremely important, and I would highly recommend that course that we offer at the Business Talk Library University. And Terrell, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, one of the things I want to say about that course is, I created that course because I was talking to a bunch of people and they were like, I don't know who is the right person to pick. And so what I
Mhm.
did is I took a lot of the context of those situations and said, all right, here are all the finance and accounting players that are going to be
Mhm.
involved with a successful business.
Yep.
And here's what each of those players do. So when you
Mm.
start to understand what each of those players do, you're not calling your bookkeeper for, with tax questions, or you're not calling your bookkeeper trying to get them to do something that they don't do, or you're not calling your tax person to do something that, your CFO should be doing. Because one of the things you run into is that, what your tax, CPA or your tax attorney is probably going to charge you by the hour. So every
Yep.
time you pick up the phone and call them and ask them questions, it's going to cost you a bit more. And if you're asking the CPA or your tax CPA questions that you should be asking your CFO, what's going to happen
Mhm.
is your tax CPA is going to take them longer to get you the right answer, but
Yep.
you're going to be the one that ends up having to pay for their time. So you want to make sure
That's
you
good.
understand, like, what does each player do on the team? And how do I direct my questions to make sure that one is I'm not spending money I don't have to, and I'm getting an answer from the right person. So when you start thinking about that for your business, it really comes down to, as a business owner, you're really having to figure out like, hey, how do I use the team that's available to me and make
Mhm.
sure that I'm getting the right information from the right places? Because if you're getting if you're trying to get information from the wrong place, it's going to cost you more money, or you're probably not going to get the best advice, which could turn into a bigger problem for you.
No, that's really good. That's really, really good insight. And I think also part of that, without going into too much detail, is just understanding for where you are in your business, understanding the right type of support, right? And I think that course will really help give you insight into that, and highly recommend it. So yes, Terrell, thank you so much for educating us. Really appreciate it. And I also feel like I have a better understanding of tax season, and I'm also prepared for it. So thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Small Business CFOs, where we feel like finance should not be the most complicated part of your business. We break it down. Until next time, take care.